This speaks volumes about the San Antonio Spurs, as this aspect of this upcoming season reveals all, as Mitch Johnson has some incredible decisions to make, but with all the talk about De'Aaron Fox and Dylan Harper, it's drowning out the other decisions with the lineup, such as the big man rotation, but most importantly, our 2 and 3 guard spots. We have to dive into exactly what is making this tough on Mitch Johnson, how he can navigate this, and what it means for not only the Spurs playing this season, but the future trade market, future signings, the impact on the payroll. There's a lot of aspects of this that Mitch Johnson is going to have to dive into, and we're going to dive into all of it on this episode of Spurs Digest. And hey, before we get into it, just a quick reminder, hit that free subscribe button because we're super close to 10,000. Thank you guys for tuning in. Every single day, all summer long, we're here with Spurs content. We could not appreciate you more. But before we get into the Mitch Johnson stuff, and by the way, there's an article linked down below for that I suggest you read, but we'll talk about that in a bit. I want to talk about Derek White, because on his podcast recently, Derek White, D. White, the Buffalo, one of our favorite players ever. I still love him. And, that funny quote came out about Pop, but it's not that I want to talk about. I want to talk about what Derek White had to say about Luke Kornet on his podcast, and it's just awesome. He said, hate to see him leave, but you're just so happy for him to get what he deserves. I think San Antonio is going to love him. He kind of just makes the game easier for you. Now, this was a bit later he said this, but I felt like it worked with this quote, because he's not asking for the ball in the block, and he's not asking for any stats. Hey, we know that he's not asking for any stats. 19 minutes a night, 6 and 5 with that 1.0 blocks per game. And again, the Kornet contest matters a lot, but Derek White's praise means even more, honestly. Like, we saw the effort that Luke Kornet gave for the Celtics, but maybe not a lot of us Spurs fans had that much time to watch a ton of Celtics basketball. Like, yeah, they won the title last year, and it's like, okay, we did see a bit of it, but to hear a player say how important Kornet was, D. White was raving about Luke Kornet this entire segment, so that is amazing. But the quote I showed you is not even the whole story. He said they're probably going to play him and Wemby together, which, hey, we might. I mean, looking at this center rotation, could play him together. We have Barnes, we have Sochan. Olynyk is a 4 or a 5. We'll get into that a bit later. But he said they're probably going to play him and Wemby together, which is going to be insane. He's going to be absolutely insane. And he's just a guy that knows how to play the game the right way you want to play with. And that is so true with Kornet. But, to hear that from him, we know the rim protection aspect that Kornet gave. That's what we wanted from him, right? To come in, get some boards, be that backup center in a role where he's never really played the number one backup for a long stretch who might be relied upon to play 20-ish minutes. So, we've never really done that, but we gave him $11 million a year to do it, and I think he's ready to do it. And to hear the praise, again, from so many people, not only from our own fans, because obviously we're thrilled about Luke Kornet, but Derek White himself saying, I hate that he's gone, but I think him and Wemby are going to be insane. I just love to see that. Look, it just reinforces the opinion that we all have. And again, I think the addition of Kelly Olynyk by trading away our young players there to the Washington Wizards actually helps us insulate Luke Kornet a bit. So some of those spot backup center minutes, you can put Olynyk there, or maybe Olynyk is going to be the top backup center and Kornet's going to be that guy who I don't know, right? We also can't forget that Luke Kornet shot 4 threes a game in his first 2 years in the league. Don't know if that's going to come back. He kind of stopped focusing on that, but I'm starting to wonder if he's just going to start bombing threes again. Anyway, regardless, I just thought that was a super cool thing to lead into this video, but now we're getting into the big thing. And again, like I said, there's an article linked down below because it was written by Sean McKenna talking about at Air Alamo saying Spurs Johnson has tough decisions ahead as the depth improves. Now, there's different aspects that Sean touches on, and I suggest you go read it down below. I'm not going to spoil the article. You got to go check out the original article. That's why it's linked down there. Give Sean some credit. But not affiliated with Air Alamo, by the way. We are not. I just like a lot of the articles they post. But I wanted to dive into the Spurs payroll this year and just some very interesting aspects for Mitch Johnson, because Mitch himself, he was under scrutiny a good bit last year as he was dealing with an injury-riddled team. And now again, this year, like I said earlier, the narrative is controlled by De'Aaron Fox and Harper, which I'm straying away from today. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about the big man rotation and our swingman rotation, because those to me are the positions with the most interesting aspects to them. And we're going to fix the base bar. There we go. No editing this time. I don't know what's going on with that, but hey, we got to fix some of the source code. However, we look at this team, right? You know what? Even better. Let's look at the lineup. And yeah, I'm done talking about point guard. Fox and Harper, they'll figure it out. I'm not worried. It's those other minutes. And if I start with the big men, I want to go there first. Because, big men, Jeremy Sochan could play some 3, probably more of a 4. Harrison Barnes, again, kind of the same thing. They're both 3-4s, but they're definitely both power forwards. And again, I know a lot of you think Barnes is going to start. I probably don't disagree. I just like Jeremy Sochan, so I have him there starting. And then I have Kelly there, but Kelly is, again, a 4 or a 5. But this is where it gets confusing to me, because you have 5 players that are very, very solid rotation players. Every single one of these 5 players who you plan to play at the 4 or the 5 this season could easily play 20 minutes a game on many other teams. And so it's not so much about misuse of the players. Well, Sean touches a bit on that, like how certain players will get locked out, and maybe that's a bit more applicable to the guard situation. I don't think I'm worried about players getting blocked out from the big man situation, because I think on any given night you can just afford to go with the hot hand. It's more about how I think fans and, media, and maybe even us, will react to Mitch Johnson's rotations. Because I think it's an inevitability that if you look at this and you look at a guy like Jeremy Sochan, who is, again, hopefully coming into this season fully healthy, right? He's going to come in here and he's going to try and light the world on fire. When he wasn't recovering from injury this year, in like the games at the start of the season and the very end, he was averaging like 15 and 9. And he's just continuing to progress. We're seeing his good jumper coming out with training for Team Poland. And then Kelly Olynyk coming in, averaging 9 a game last year on 42% from 3. Like, this guy deserves a ton of minutes as well. I think for him, it's probably less about playing a bunch of minutes, but on a team like San Antonio, where floor spacing is so important, you want to deploy him in strategic ways. Harrison Barnes is another guy who shot like 43% from 3 last year. He was our best three-point shooter, bar none. Yeah, there were some other decent shooters, but it was Harrison Barnes. So, obviously, Wemby's going to get his, and Luke Cornett we just talked about. So, I think there's going to be a lot of pressure, I think, on Mitch Johnson to make the decisions here to, like, figure out your best way. Again, I'm not talking about, locking players out from the forward core. Or forward and center, I should say. It's more about figuring out the proper balance on a night-to-night basis, which is not easy. Like, as a coach, it is not easy, let alone to manage personalities. I know these guys all love to be Spurs, but, like, to manage 5 guys who legit have a case to play at any given point in the game is extremely difficult. And when you shift your focus to the guards, that just becomes even more evident, right? And again, less so, well, not even the guards, more the 2 and the 3. Because Stephon Castle is, he's going to play the 2 guard this year. He's not going to have many minutes playing point unless it's a time where, like, maybe Fox is in foul trouble and you don't want to run Harper as the primary ball handler. You can have Castle play those spot 1 minutes, but, like, Vassell, Keldon Johnson, Julian Champagnie, and Stephon Castle. Again, like, are we really going to run a team that's 11-12 deep throughout the whole regular season? That's not really how we tend to operate, because you don't have the minutes to play all these guys 10-15 minutes a night. And so that does sort of, now if we get to talking about locking out, Carter Bryant, it kind of hurts him a bit because he's not going to play that much. I'm not worried about him because I don't think he needs to play that much. And I think if he ends up playing, it'll be his defense speaking for itself. So that's just a win-win. But again, especially a guy like Julian Champagnie here. Like, Julian Champagnie, like, we have him at a very cheap contract, so it doesn't really matter, I guess, if he doesn't play. But his three-point shooting is so valuable to the team, especially at his cap hit, right? So there's some interesting aspects here. Like, you might end up locking a guy like Julian Champagnie out. Even a guy like Keldon Johnson. I don't want to say you're going to lock him out, but, like, again, you look at this rotation, you have like 5 guys or 4 or 5 guys that have averaged at least 19 points a game in a season. Vassell averaged 19.5 just a couple of years ago. Harrison Barnes, when he was with the Mavericks, averaged 19, and I think he's averaged like 18 and 17 since then too. Obviously, De'Aaron Fox, obviously Wembanyama, and so Keldon Johnson is a former 22-point per game scorer. So at the moment, that is tough to navigate on its own for Mitch Johnson. I need to hear your guys' thoughts. What do you think he's going to do with this 11-12 man rotation where all these guys could play? Are we just going to sit? I mean, McLaughlin and Bryant, I think, are the 2 clear guys that you can sit, but that still leaves you 11 deep with guys that are going to be, they're going to earn their minutes, but you got to find the minutes for them. And that goes to my final point here, where I'm looking at the payroll and I'm looking at the future for this team and how we can move around the roster, because we know Victor Wembanyama's extension's coming up. It's probably going to be signed next summer. You just have to assume that we're going to pay him that year early. It's done. Jeremy Sochan's extension has to come between now and next summer at some point during this season. Same thing for De'Aaron Fox. Harrison Barnes, we have to replace him, so maybe that opens up a door for you there. Harrison Barnes' contract leaving opens up some extra money and maybe another roster spot for maybe Carter Bryant to kind of jump up in the rotation. Sure, but Harrison Barnes is already a good player, and he's not the kind of guy that you'll trade away at the deadline, for example, for assets. But a guy like Keldon Johnson, who's still making 17.5 this year and next, who has a history of scoring near 20 points per game, who, again, on this roster is like, he's going to get his minutes. I still really like Big Body. I think Big Body's going to force his way into this rotation. But he's not going to get the minutes to show the kind of player that he truly is, the kind of player he could be on a team where there's more space in front of him. And I think there's a few guys on the Spurs like that, right? And again, we brought in Kornet and Olynyk for a reason. But like when I look at Keldon and I look at Champagnie, like we need Champagnie shooting. Keldon Johnson, again, seems a bit expendable. Maybe even Devin Vassell too. Looking at this payroll, it's like, finding guys enough minutes to showcase their talent as well if you want to trade them is important, because if a guy is getting pushed out of your rotation, their trade value naturally goes down. Now, on the plus side of that, if you want to bring them back, you can maybe sign them at a lesser deal, but other teams might be willing to take a bigger swing. So I'm just saying, there are a bunch of different avenues that my mind goes down when I look at the rotation this year for Mitch Johnson. So I need to hear your guys' thoughts. Like, how would you handle this? Do you think he's under a lot of pressure to manage this? Because this team is the deepest it's been in a number of years, and finding the minutes for all these guys, I think, is not going to be an easy task. Oh, I have full faith in Mitch Johnson to do it, but as I look at the rotation, there's implications for not playing guys, for overplaying certain guys, and just wondering how he's going to handle it. So let me know your thoughts down below, but that'll do it for this episode of Spurs Digest. And hey, most importantly, if you made it this far in the video, 11 minutes in, you listen to me ramble for 11 minutes straight, come back to this tab if you clicked away. Thank you for being here. Please hit that free subscribe button if you haven't already. I know I ask a lot, but like every time I ask, you guys do it. We're so close to 10,000. Thank you for tuning in every single day. I'm your host, Josh Gosse. I'll catch you all in the next one.